Selamat siang. Good afternoon. Thank you so much untuk teman-teman semua yang sudah hadir siang hari ini. So, we are grateful to be here. From ADB, we have here Pak Said Zaidansyah, our Deputy Country Director from ADB Indonesia, who will introduce ADB, how ADB contribute to Indonesian development journey, and also in general in Asia. And we also have our HR specialist, Pak Pierre Diens and Ibu Geraldine, who will explain in detail how teman-teman semua could contribute to Indonesian development and also, development in general through ADB. So, thank you so much. To start, we would like to invite Ibu Dr. Arizona to provide welcome remark from FEB UGM. Please, Ibu.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's event with Asian Development Bank on recruitment outreach. Our honorable guest, Pak Said Zaidansyah, Deputy Country Director Indonesia Resident Mission of ADB, Bapak Priasto Aji, as well as our moderator today, Senior Economics Officer at ADB, Pak Pierre Diens, Principal Human Resource Specialist, and Ibu Geraldine Deesis, Associate Human Resource Office, and my beloved students in Faculty of Economics and Business, as well as in Universitas Gadjah Mada. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you, Pak Said and colleagues from ADB for coming to FEB UGM today for our recruitment outreach on Young Professional Program and Internship Program. Our collaboration and cooperation of FEB UGM and ADB has long gone. In 2010, we have ADB Resource Center in our library, and then going back in 2010 and until 2018, ADB and FEB UGM also have a scholarship cooperation for STAR BPKP programs, and then several research collaboration with our research and training unit, as well as guest lectures that have been done quite recently before the pandemic, such as ADB talks. So we would like to have ongoing collaboration and cooperation with ADB, and one of the event will be for today's program. And we want to maintain existing cooperation as well as strengthening future collaboration on recruitments, on research, as well as on ADB talks, Pak Said. If we can have more future events on these ADB talks, that would be great. And I would like to also say for students here, you will have a great opportunity to hear from ADB regarding any opportunities that you will have. And I hope you benefit from this event and utilize these networking sessions later in the day. And also, I believe that ADB will find many of our young talents in UGM that can be worked at ADB. So once again, welcome to UGM, and thank you so much for coming here, and I hope you have a very wonderful stay in Jogja. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Arizona. Next, we would like to welcome Bapak Said Zaidansyah, Deputy Co-Director for ADB Indonesia, to provide his remark. Please, Pak.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk semua. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Ibu Arizona for facilitating this event, the ADB Career Presentation event this afternoon in Universitas Gadjah Mada. So the purpose or the aim of this event is basically to increase awareness among, bright young Indonesian students such as yourself on what is ADB, what is it that we do, and how do we recruit. The latter is really the essence of the event today. And one of the reasons why we're having events such as this is because there is now a lack of Indonesian talent in international financial institutions, in multinational corporations, and other entities, institutions of certain quality outside of Indonesia. And we want to basically find ways on how we can help young Indonesian talents to be able to penetrate the international arena, particularly at this juncture, right, where Indonesia as a country is increasing its profile. We had a very successful G20 presidency. We're now chairing ASEAN, and many have said, Indonesia chairing ASEAN is something that people wait or anticipating, or people do expect, concrete results to come out of that. So we do need to then, at a personal level, individual level, also rise to the occasion. So in this event, we're not going to do any recruitment because ADB recruitment process goes through a certain steps, and we need to sort of maintain the integrity of that step. But what we want to do is help you understand what it takes for you to be able to do well in landing that opportunity with ADB. And this knowledge that we will share today hopefully will also be relevant to other international financial institutions and perhaps even multinational corporations, right? So information that we will share with you will include obviously the ADB recruitment profile, but also in terms of how you should present yourself in social media, how you should prepare your CVs, how you should carry yourself during interview and so forth. We do want this to be an interactive session. We will do a presentation. It may take something like an hour or so, but we have time, and we do want you to ask a lot of questions. And I want to also make sure that we have enough time for some form of a networking after the presentation and the Q&A, so that you get to know us, we get to know you a bit better. Now, coming back to ADB collaborations with UGM, I mean, UGM obviously is a very important higher education institution. Many of ADB staff, present and in the past, that are working in ADB headquarters or in many other countries around Asia and the Pacific are UGM alumni. So, there are clearly, clearly UGM students are very much, or UGM alumni would very much be people that ADB would target, right? And because there's a lot of ADB alumni, and there's a lot of UGM alumni in ADB, and many of the UGM alumni in ADB have done particularly well. So one of our country directors, the country director in Bangladesh, for example, is from Universitas Gadjah Mada. I call him Bang Edimon Ginting. That's just one example of a number of others. Now, I also wanted to thank Ibu Arizona for acknowledging the relationship and the cooperations that we've had with the Universitas Gadjah Mada. We've just recently approved a project called Prime Step, where we are financing financing the science technology parks in a number of universities in Indonesia, including in Universitas Gadjah Mada. Now, in terms of ADB talk, I would certainly support that. We have Indonesia Development Talk organized that we organize, where we bring in speakers from the government, speakers from non-government entities, as well as from ADB to talk about topic of relevance. And we would certainly would like to explore the possibility of how we can do that, with Universitas Gadjah Mada, for example. So we're very excited, Ibu, for further strengthening the cooperation, and also I'm also equally excited to see how we can bring in more UGM students, alumni to eventually join ADB. So, even though we don't have a recruitment session, but we hope that, you all will stay and will ask a lot of questions. And the idea here is that, by having this session, you would have a knowledge from early on how to sort of plan and navigate your career, so that eventually, or in not so distant future, you would be able to join ADB or organizations such as ADB. So let me stop there, and I can tell you that I'm very excited, and my colleagues, Pierre, Deans, Geraldine, are also very excited to present, to you, what we have today. And I'd like to also acknowledge my colleague, Priyasto Aji, who's our senior economist, who will moderate the session today. So let me stop there. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Said. So we'll start our sessions. Please, Pak Said, Pak Pierre, Ibu Geraldine to come up to the stage. Yeah. So thanks so much. So first we'll have Pak Said to present on ADB contribution to Indonesian development, especially, and also development in Asia in general. Pak Said has been in ADB for more than 20 years. He's joining ADB through the Young Professional Program. And I think it's a good opportunity for teman-teman semua to learn from him. How he, joined ADB. Thank you. So, is it ready? Okay, please, Pak Said.
Thank you. It's okay. No, it's okay. Oh, okay. So I should just move this. Yeah. This is okay. All right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So. Yes, that's right. Pak Haji had mentioned, I joined ADB 21 years ago as a young professional. So that is basically one of the many venues to join ADB. You could join ADB as a mid-career professional, as a young professional, and as an intern. But an intern is for a defined period. My colleagues, Pierre and Geraldine, will give you a bit more information and deliberations on that, and then you could ask questions right after that. So, but my presentation today will focus more on what is ADB and who we are and what we do, basically. Yeah. So this is I like to start with this slide. Right? This slide tells you a little bit about the face of ADB. So ADB is an international financial institution, so multilateral development banks, that does espouses basically diversity and inclusion. It's a multicultural organization, as you can see here. We have colleagues, comes from South Asia, who comes from East Asia, who comes from Southeast Asia, who comes from the Pacific, who comes from Europe, from North America, Western Europe, particularly North America, as well as from the Caucasus, so countries that you probably wouldn't consider as being part of the Asia and Pacific. I mean, my colleague here, Pierre, for example, he's from Switzerland, right? So, and we have many colleagues as well from different parts of the world. Sorry, let me. Yeah. So who we are? So we are international development finance institutions. We were founded in 1966. We have 68 members, 49 regional members, 19 non-regional members. We help developing member countries in Asia and the Pacific through a number of mechanisms. One is finance and knowledge. We promote good policy. We want to be a good policy dialogue partner of the government. And we try to catalyze regional cooperation we try to catalyze good regional cooperation with different stakeholders. Our headquarters is in Manila, Philippines. We have 26 field offices, including one in Indonesia. And then we have 6 representatives and sub-regional offices. One is in Frankfurt. We've got one in Washington, D.C., another one in Tokyo. On the sub-regional office, we have an office in Sydney, in Fiji, as well as in Singapore. So, we are we have presence in quite a number of places around the world. Next slide. So our office in Indonesia was established in 1987. Indonesia is currently the 3rd largest borrower of ADB. And in each year, ADB would provide $2 billion, around $2 billion in annual commitments. Yeah, this is for our sovereign and non-sovereign. So ADB doesn't just provide lending to the government. We also provide lending to the private sector, right? So I'll speak a little bit about what we do with the government as well as what we do with the private sector. We have increased focus on knowledge solutions, not just financing, but also we want to be able to become a knowledge bank. We want to be able to basically help our member countries, to navigate some of the more complex development challenges, and that often requires not just financing, but also knowledge sharing. Indonesia is a founding member of ADB and is the 6th largest shareholder. Being the 6th largest shareholders, in many ways, this means that ADB is an Indonesia bank as well, right? 6th largest shareholder in the organization, and it's probably the organization or the multilateral financial institutions where Indonesia has the largest stake, right? So when you compare with Indonesia's stake in World Bank, IMF, AIIB, Islamic Development Bank, as well as in OFIT, the largest is, as we speak today, the largest is in ADB. More recently, I think there is a plan for Indonesia to increase its shareholding in Islamic Development Bank and become the 3rd largest shareholder there, but that process is still on the way. So as I speak to you today, ADB, Indonesia participation in ADB is the largest participation of Indonesia in a particular international financial institution. Next slide. So this is basically what get us up at night, or us being to sort of feel excited to wake up in the morning, is how we can address the poverty challenge in Asia and the Pacific. There are 264 million people that live in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 a day. 836 million people are living in poverty between $1 a day. And they are at risk of being pushed into extreme poverty
through economic downturns or extreme shocks. So these are basically issues of concern to institutions like ADB. Next slide. And we have a strategy, how can we create a region that is prosperous, that is inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. And these are 7, let's say, operational priorities for us. How can we address remaining poverty and reduce inequalities? How can we accelerate progress in gender equality? How can we tackle climate change, build climate and disaster resilience, and enhance environmental sustainability? This, for example, defines, the work that we do with energy transition. ADB is very much involved in energy transition space. We're very much involved in climate-related activities as well. I'll speak a little bit about that later. In terms of gender equality, every single project that we do, we need to make sure that, we address the gender inequalities, and every project has to have a rating, right? Whether, it can be, doing a gender mainstreaming, whether there is some gender elements, whether there is, if there's no gender element, for example, the project would not push through, right? So each project that we do, we must make sure that 50% of the population are considered, right? And address remaining poverty, reducing inequality. So also, what is the economic internal rate of return for a project? These are things that we need to sort of consider. We want to make cities more livable as well. So we want to help, our cities, including in Indonesia, more livable. We're working with Makassar, for example, in this. We're working with Jakarta to help, the city be able to generate greater revenue from from, let's say, the constructions of many of the transport facilities that they have done, through land value capture and so forth. Promoting rural development and food security. Again, this is something that is important to us, strengthening governance and institutional capacity, fostering regional cooperation and integration. Now, this is a very, these are topics that we can discuss for hours, but I'm going to speak so I've spoken very quickly on this. I'll keep it to that, and then if there are questions later, I'm happy to address them, because there's a few more slides I have to get through. Next slide. So, 7 operational priorities, Strategy 2030, that is at the corporate level. At the country level, we have what is called as Country Partnership Strategy 2020-24, right? So this is basically our strategy in Indonesia. So it's very country specific. And how can we help Indonesia emerge stronger from COVID? So this was approved in September 2020. As you can imagine, at that time, we were still very much in the midst of COVID. That was even before Delta came. The Delta wave came. So we wanted to help the government basically address the challenges of COVID and to have a strong post-COVID recovery. And therefore, we sort of identified 3 strategic pillars. Improve well-being, looking at workforce skills, social protection, strengthening social protection, educational quality. That's why we have projects basically with, we've worked with 34 polytechnics recently, trying to link basically these polytechnics, increase the quality of the polytechnics and link them with the industry. We're working on building science technology parks in 5 universities, UI, ITB, UGM, IPB, and ITS. We're also working with Universitas Lampung on building their teaching hospital. We're working with other universities as well, building green campus, helping them build a curriculum that will help their students prepare for the Industrial Revolution 4.0. This would be in Jambi, Universitas Jambi, Universitas Riau, Universitas Malikul Saleh. Do you know where Universitas Malikul Saleh is? Anybody know? In North Aceh, in Aceh Utara. and then also in UPI, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. Do you know where that is? Bandung, right? Yeah. So we're also working on healthcare system, right? We are going to basically help the Minister of Health, the Ministry of Health, implement the 6 pillars of their health sector transformation strategy. We're looking at the first pillar, strengthening the primary healthcare. Accelerate economic recovery. There's also a number of different areas that we're working on. Economic policy, structural reforms, domestic resource mobilizations like LVC. LVC can generate basically greater resources for the local governments. We're also looking at how we can help Indonesia basically mobilize more taxes. Indonesia tax to GDP ratio today is one of the lowest, one of the lowest in the world. In fact, it's the lowest in Asia and the Pacific among the more mature economy. It's around 10%, 11%, very low. Financial market deepening and inclusion. We help basically the Dewan Nasional, Keuangan Inklusif, DNKI or DNKI, under coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs, introduce the first roadmap or the first strategy for financial inclusion that is gender-based. So that's something that we're proud of. Quality infrastructure, energy, transport, and livable cities. So that's also another pillar. And then strengthening resilience, climate change mitigation, adaptation, disaster risk management and finance, water and food security, environmental sustainability, and green recovery. These are basically the work that we're focusing on in Indonesia, right? Or the strategy that we have. And this strategy is something that we discuss with the government and agreed upon with the government through Bappenas, through the Ministry of Planning and MOF. Right. Next slide. And how do we do this? How do we basically try to implement our country partnership strategy? First is through finance. We provide our own financing while mobilizing funds from other sources. Through knowledge. We focus on practical value that fits local conditions. And then partnership. We promote dialogue and collaborations among diverse partners and stakeholders. Next slide. So financing, right? We basically, in terms of financing, we have sovereign financing and non-sovereign financing. On sovereign financing in 2022, we provided $1.881 billion US. In 2020, we provided $3.4 billion US. So we were the largest provider of development finance in the country in 2020, and we are still, among the largest provider of development finance in the country today. And we do, the development finance or the sovereign financing through building investment projects. So that is basically the bricks and the mortars, right? Something that you can feel, something that you can touch. So fund disbursements, there are different ways to disburse the funds. We also provide funding through policy-based lending. That is budget support. As you know, under the law on state finance, law number 17/2003, Indonesia can maintain a fiscal deficit posture on a state budget up to, and up to 3%, right? So Indonesia has typically maintained a much lower, a lower budget deficit pre-pandemic, but there is a budget deficit, and to basically plug that budget deficit, the government would either go through the market, issue bonds, or seek funding from development partners like ADB. And our funding for this purpose is much cheaper and longer than what the government can get in the market. And then you have result-based lending. Result-based lending is we would finance a government program with focus on results rather than on expenditures, right? So then the funds are disbursed when a set of program results as agreed with the borrower are achieved. Next slide. So this is basically where we have collaboration, right? The different places, different provinces. So as you can see, we have projects basically on sanitation, flood management, geothermal. This is with Geodipa, Dieng Patuha. And then we have, energy, shrimp culture, as well as education, right? So across 26 provinces. And this was actually, we need to update this. This was prepared when Indonesia had only 34 provinces. Do you know how many provinces we have today? Huh? 38, yeah. So this was on the basis of 34 provinces. Yeah. Let me, next slide. Other than sovereign financing, we also have non-sovereign financing, right? So we provide financing also to companies, and we do this without recourse to the government. And this can be a debt, this can be a guarantee, or equity investment. As well, technical assistance and concessional capital, right? So, in equity, for example, we are a shareholder in a number of companies in the country. Guarantee, we can also provide guarantee. Debt, we are at one point one of the largest provider of financing to the IPPs in new and renewable energy. Now, I should mention that when we provide funding for the private sector, we do it in a way that we don't crowd out the market. So we don't provide tenor that is longer than the market, much longer than the market, slightly longer perhaps, but not much longer. We don't provide pricing that is cheaper than the market. Because if we do that, we would then run the risk of crowding out or distorting the market. So we take great care to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, next slide. This is how ADB brings the impact that we bring, right? In healthcare services, public finance, social protection. So this just gives you a little bit more idea of that. We'll try to sort of share with you the slides here so that you could have a better read of this. And then next slide. Next, okay. Here are some of our landmark initiatives. So we have energy transition. We're very proud of that, energy transition. So we support the government in ETM country platform as well as in the $20 billion commitment under the Just Energy Transition Partnership. We have secured funding for the ETM Partnership Fund. And then, we have funding as well to PLN to try to promote, the early retirement of their coal-fired power plant. And then we have just transition. So we're also mindful that we don't want to create a situation where the government or ADB pushes for early retirement of coal-fired power plant, and then the people that are working for those for the power plants, or the community that hinges their livelihood, on the existence and presence of that fire power plant, then to have to suffer economically. So that has happened in a number of countries. You see this in Detroit, for example, right? A city that is now decaying because the car factories are moving out. You see this perhaps in other countries as well, in Sheffield, in the UK, for example. Pittsburgh also had this at one point, but then they were able to rejuvenate their city to eventually then become one of the most liveliest in the US. But when the steel mining, when the steel industry plummeted, they were also in trouble, right? Next slide is on climate-related activities. So here, blue finance, carbon pricing and markets, clean energy, waste management, just transition, low emission transport. So we're financing, for example, MRT in Jakarta, right? The east-west line. So that would be the third phase. Next slide. Nusantara. This is also another area something that we are supporting the government on, right? So master planning and design. We do the environmental assessment or impact, and then mobilizing financing. So with Nusantara, we're not just looking at how we can support Nusantara be able to generate investments, but we also look into how we can repurpose the assets of the central government in Jakarta, repurpose means, and we do it. We try to do it without, we try to suggest government on how to approach this without having to dispose, without having to sell. But there are a number of PPP structure that can be used, and then the proceeds of that asset repurposing can then be used for the constructions of Nusantara, right? So that also needs to sort of ensure that the regulations, the necessary regulations are in place and so forth. So these are just some of the things that we're doing. I just wanted to give you a flavor of ADB work. I'm happy to take on more questions, whether during the Q&A or during the networking session, if you like. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Pierre to discuss. Please, next slide. How we recruit, right? That is probably something that is of most interest to all of you here. So take it away, Pierre.
Thank you, Pak Said. Selamat siang. Apa kabar? Those are only the few words I learned in 3 days in Indonesia, so apologies. Okay, so nice meeting you, everybody. So my name is Pierre. Said mentioned earlier, I am from Switzerland. I joined ADB 8 years ago. Previously, I worked in the humanitarian field with MSF, Doctors Without Borders, and then also work in the academic sectors, in the Graduate Institute in Geneva, and for business school as well as Lausanne. So, okay, next slide, please. A quick overview of the agenda today. I'm going to give you a few information about ADB's new operating model. We are basically restructuring ourselves internally. The different area of expertise that we have, how we hire, information about the 2 programs I guess some of you are interested in, and how we interview, what kind of benefits do we offer, and why diversity matters to us. Next slide, please. So, okay, like many organizations, in order to be more effective and efficient, especially after COVID, our clients, our developing member countries have been facing increased challenges, socio-economic, political, and health challenges, as you know. So we are currently looking at the way we work in ADB. So we are going through structural transformation and cultural transformation. So Said already mentioned a lot about climate and knowledge, basically knowledge products. We are increasing our efforts in the private sector. Traditionally, ADB was very much focused on financing to governments, but more and more we do provide support to private sector companies. And internally, we are looking at, we recently redefined our values, which are trustworthy, collaborative, and transformational. I've seen that here in UGM, you have 5 core values as well. One is social concerns, right? It's quite interesting because we're in ADB, we don't have that value, because maybe for us it's a given, right? Working for a development organization. But we are also looking at how can we work smarter, better, and faster, right? More and more, the needs are increasing, so we need to be more efficient. We are trying to reduce bureaucracy and be more basically efficient in everything we do. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the different area of expertise that we have in ADB. And the first 2 rows at the top are basically our operations. As you can see, it's very, very broad. And if ever you join ADB one day, you'll be working with people from very different backgrounds and mindset and style of working, right? From education, energy, finance, health, transport, up to gender, governance, regional cooperation, and social development. And the 2 rows at the bottom are basically our non-operational departments. So basically the corporate functions, if you want. Just want to mention we have basically 2 large departments in ADB. Procurement is a very important department. We do lots of infrastructure projects, so it's a large department. Our general counsel office as well is a large one. And Pasaid is a lawyer. He's coming from this department. and he has been evolving in a different position today. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is the map of the Asia Pacific, and so you can see we are working. We have resident missions in Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan on the far west, and on the far east are the Pacific Islands. And I don't know who knows who is our latest member. Anyone? So it's basically Niue, which is a small island composed of 1,400 inhabitants. And so it's quite interesting. Those islands are called the SIDS, S-I-D-S, which stands for Small Islands Developing States. But I recently read an interesting article where they would like to be called differently. I believe Large Ocean Islands. This is quite interesting, right? How they're switching it. So lessons learned: never let you be called, by a name that you don't like. Okay, so yeah, we have 26 resident missions, and in the Pacific we have what we call Pacific country offices, and in some islands we have only 1 or 2 staff, right? Very, very, very small offices, but very important in order to implement our project. Next slide, please. So, quick overview of the number of staff that we have in ADB. So, 3,000, almost 4,000 staff, 1,600 local staff, basically Filipinos based in Manila, and 1,300 international staff. The majority are based in Manila, but around 200, like Said, are based on the field, Indonesia. Next slide, please. So, okay, so we try to summarize here the 6 main points that we are looking for when we hire staff in ADB. So, in order to become an international staff, let me say level 3, we have 10 levels in ADB. You can Google it, it's easy to find. So you need to have 6 years of professional experience at minimum. You need to have a university degree. Master degree is not mandatory, so we require a bachelor degree at least, except for our research and economic departments, where we are looking at PhD graduates. But we do have a lot of economists in ADB who do not work in the research department, right? They're basically everywhere, the economists. And yeah, we do require, on top of the technical skills, communication skills are very important, people skills. In ADB, you do not achieve goals alone, right? If you want to be a one-man or one-woman show, it doesn't work. You have to go in another organization, because we achieve goals together. Social development work is maybe one of the most complex one, so you achieve goals together. International experience, international exposure, and Geraldine is going to talk more about it later, so I will pass, but that's also, of course, very important. As an international staff, you will be asked to lead teams. You will, on a day-to-day basis, through projects, so that's also something you need to be interested in. If you want to be just a technical guru in your own expertise, then you might be confused in an international organization, right? And of course, we are asking for a core area of expertise. Next slide. Okay, so for the Young Professional Program, we have one program every year, and we do usually hire between, the minimum is 6, the maximum that we have hired was almost 20 in 1 year, so usually 10 to 12 on average. And we do offer an international staff contract. It's a 3 years contract, should you be selected, of course. And then if you graduate at the end of the program, then you will be offered a regular position. So we are, of course, looking for highly qualified candidates with high potential to grow within the organization. And the age is important because you need to be 33 years old, and below upon joining ADB. And you will be basically working as a staff already. So the program is not different than what staff are doing. we may be less, demanding about the results, but you will be working with different colleagues. You will also be rotating in different departments. So we want you to be exposed to different contexts, different people, and different challenges. And of course, you will be working with teams on very specific projects, working on country programming, or CPS as we call it, and sector and policy studies as well. So the internship program is much shorter. It's a 2 to 3, sometimes up to 6 months, no, Geraldine? We have had some internships, no? 2 to 4? Yeah, okay. 2 to 4 months, usually projects. Those are very specific. So unlike the young professional where you apply only to one very generic job description and you highlight your own expertise, for the internship you will have to apply to a specific role, a specific project. It's going to be basically project-based with very specific achievables. And it's basically either in the sovereign side or the private sector side. And what is very important is that you need to be a student. You need to be enrolled in a master degree or a PhD. If you already graduate, then you are not eligible anymore to apply. So yeah, we have always some questions, what's in it for me if I'm already a young graduate and I'm not yet qualified for the young professional and I'm no more qualified for the internship. So there is maybe a gap there that maybe one day we will fill, but today there is no possibility. So we usually advertise around 15 internships per year, right? Per batch. That we have 2 batches per year, right? So around 30. It's less competitive than the young professional program. And today we do have staff in ADB who used to be interns. They join ADB, they did the internships, then they graduate, they work in somewhere else, and they come back a few years later. Next slide. So quick tips on how we interview. We already mentioned we look at the technical skills, the knowledge skills. We look at your core competencies or your soft skills. Today, maybe in my time, we were not really working in projects, at the university. We were basically more very individual type of work. Today, in today's world, I guess you are much more used to work in projects and in teams, right? And it's always the same thing. When you work in a team at school, sometimes it's difficult because you have someone who doesn't do the work, you have someone who talks too much, you have someone who doesn't say anything, but maybe he or she knows a lot more than you do, and you have the ones, usually 2, who wants to be the leader, and then they fight. So that's also the same in the reality, in the real world, right? It's exactly the same. So core competencies, soft skills are very important, and for us, equally important than the technical skills. And so should you be invited for an interview, you will be required to do a presentation. Usually 5 slides, 10 minutes. So you need to be very impactful and ready, to get further questions from the presentation. Right? Don't throw out concepts there that you cannot explain further on. Right? So you might be asked to elaborate during the interview. And of course, potential is important for us. And Geraldine will talk about it a little bit later. What do we mean by potential? Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically the composition of ADB. Today, the average age of the staff is 47. Might sound a little bit old for you, but that's the reality. We hire people between 30 and 59. We just recently increased our retirement age from 60 to 65. Demographics, the main reason is about demographics. And usually the number of years of experience, as I mentioned earlier, the 3 years is the minimum. And for young professional, is 6 years for international staff level 4. But in reality, our colleagues between 4 and 6, they have between 10 and 20 years of experience. And we are very open in terms of where do you come from. Again, diversity is important. Public sector, private sector experience, NGOs. So we are very open with that. So quick overview of our compensation and benefits. So we have, of course, on top of the salary, we have health insurance, life insurance. One of our best benefits, I think, for those who have children is education assistance. So we provide assistance for your kids during secondary school, primary, secondary, and also post-secondary. 4 years post-secondary studies. So that's. I mean, personally, I have two kids today. They are in the UK, in the university, and so ADB helps me. So it's a great benefit. And we also have rental allowance, depending on where you live. Rental costs can be quite expensive. We do want you also to go back to your home country at least once a year. So we do offer you a home country travel and also allowances. And it might sound a little bit abstract for you today, but pension plan is very important, I can tell you. And non-monetary benefits, let me just mention one, which is important, is a work-life balance. COVID has taught us a lot of things. Today in ADB, you are allowed to work 2 days per week from home. And on top of that, you can work 2 months per year outside duty station. So that's very important because you can work from Europe, from the US, from USA, from anywhere in the world, taking care of your aging parents or doing another activities wherever you are. Just in terms of comparison, Google is only offering 1 month per year. So we are proud to say that we are more generous than Google. And so, but anyway, jokes aside, for us, we take seriously the mental health of our employees. And we believe also that the more flexible you are, the more performing you are, right? If you are giving flexibility, you can organize your work as you want. You achieve better results at the end of the day. Next slide. And okay, finally, this is my last slide about diversity. Again, we repeat it again. It's super important for us, and the research has shown that diverse teams perform better than non-diverse teams. It's more challenging to manage, and it's also part of your job if ever you join ADB. But if you're able to have a diverse team working well, you will achieve higher results. So thank you very much, and let me hand over to Geraldine.
Thank you, Pierre. Salamat, Siang. Okay, so earlier, Pak Said spoke about what ADB does. So he gave you an overview of ADB, and then Pierre spoke about what our talent needs are, given the kind of work that we do in Asia and the Pacific. So now we will move on to the next step. So what comes after learning about what ADB does is, of course, the application. And the talk this afternoon is to guide you on ADB's application process and to give you some tips to help you with that process. Okay. So okay, thank you. So we will go through this agenda this afternoon. I'm going to try to make it, quick so that you have enough time after the session to ask your questions. But during that short time frame, we'll try to give you as much tips as possible. Okay. So we'll talk about CV drafting, the ADB application process, what to prepare for in an interview, and then we'll also touch on LinkedIn before moving on to that Q&A. Okay. So let me start with these two words. First impression. Why do you think is first impression important? Isn't it that somebody is likely to remember you more? You create more impact if you create a good impression versus somebody who made little or no impression at all. So how do you, in the recruitment process, when should that happen? That should happen at the time that you submit your CV. Okay, and through that process, you should be able to sustain that through your interview. But of course, it's not just, how you had written your CV. At the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper, but you should be able to demonstrate through that paper and through your interview why you are the best person who is positioned for that position that you are applying for. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So this is an overview of what the ADB application process is like. And this is typically, how it is in other organizations as well. So first, we have the application period. So typically in ADB, we post our vacancies for 2 weeks. Okay. Once that closes, then we generate the list of all those applicants that had submitted their application, that lodged their application. And then so HR would then assess all these submissions at a high level, just to check if these applicants meet minimum requirements, such as, because ADB only hires nationals of its 68 members. So things like that, to make sure that these applicants are not close relatives of already an ADB staff. So these are the kinds of applicants who would probably be cut off from the initial application list. So once we've come up with that long list, we then refer that long list to the hiring manager, and they further evaluate and review that list. From there, the hiring manager will now have to make a decision whether does the hiring manager think that he or she has enough candidates now to progress into the process. If not, then we might decide to re-advertise, or we might decide to employ other channels, like we can do proactive search of candidates on LinkedIn, or say if it's a difficult to fill position, then we can employ the services of a search firm, okay? But say, assuming, okay, we have enough good quality candidates in that list, and then so the next step would be a shortlisting panel. During a shortlisting panel, what happens? So the hiring manager, the business partner, and an independent panelist, they sit together to identify a shortlist. Now, what does an independent panelist do? An independent panelist is somebody who is not from HR. They are not from the hiring department, and they sit in that panel to ensure that that the panel will objectively evaluate the candidates, because they're not from HR, not from the hiring department, so they will provide an objective perspective. So the shortlisting panel now goes through the list. They identify, say, a short list of 3 to 5 candidates, and those 3 to 5 candidates are now then invited to a panel interview. And of course, every candidate's goal is to move, from that application stage all the way to selection. Okay, so next slide, please. In this slide are some tips to help you with how to draft your CV. Okay, first is your CV has to be concise. So typically, ideally 1 to 2 pages is good. Say 10, 20 years down the road, you are applying for a senior level position, then you can stretch the length of your CV to 3 pages. Your CV has to be brief and relevant, so make sure that when you list out your experiences, your knowledge, your skills, these are relevant to the requirements that are being asked for in a job description. And then, of course, you have to customize. Don't make the mistake of, writing one CV and then you submit that same CV regardless of the, position that you apply for. So you customize that CV based on what is being asked for in a job description. Your CV should also be concrete. So you should present your skills and your experience and knowledge in measurable terms, and use powerful action verbs. So instead of saying responsible for implementing, analyzing, and creating, take out the responsible for. Just say created, implemented, led. Because those words will create more impact, and it's going to be easier for you to be noticed by the person who is reviewing your CV. Okay, next is up to date. because the hiring managers and HR will also check your social media. And you do not want us thinking, oh, why does the CV say something different from what this person has on his or her LinkedIn? So you make sure that they're consistent, that they're both up to date, and readable. You might think, no, this is just formatting, but layout is also important. The way that you lay out, the information that you have in your CV, you should put it out there in a way so that the reviewer will easily pick up the information that you want them to see about you. Why? Because your hiring manager, the business partner who will be reviewing that CV will be reviewing 50 to 150 CVs, say, for that vacancy. And they will only have, say, around 30 seconds to review each submission. So you have to make it easy for them to pick up your experiences, your skills, that will prove that you are the best candidate for that position. So next slide, please. These are some things, we said keep your CV to a minimum. Okay, so take these out already. These are not necessary on your CV. You don't have to put a photo or personal details like your marital status, your date of birth, etc. As much as possible, these should not be in a CV because these would somehow, you do not want to create bias. That's why this information should be out. And then, of course, nothing will put off more a reviewer than having spelling mistakes or grammatical errors in that CV. Now, some applicants, they want to talk about their hobbies, their interests. That's fine. But make sure that whatever you indicate there in your curriculum vitae is relevant to the job and will have skills that are also transferable to that position. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we present you with 3 channels where we post our ADB vacancies. Okay, the one on the extreme left. Okay. Okay. So the one on the extreme left is the ADB website. So that's adb.org/careers. Okay. The one in the center is ADB Career and Employment System, where we accept applications. And the one on the right is ADB's LinkedIn page. So whether you check our vacancies on the ADB website or on ADB's LinkedIn page, both will direct you to the ADB Career and Employment System. So I earlier said that our vacancies are posted for 2 weeks and no? And the deadline to submit an application is at 11:59 p.m. Manila time of the specified closing date. So please take note of that because there will be a time difference between Manila and Indonesia, and probably if you were already working in other parts of the world, then take note of that deadline. So earlier, we showed you the one on the extreme left earlier was the ADB Career Employment site. So if you enter that, there was an address there. If you enter that, it will take you to this page, and then say once you're already on the ADB Career site, okay, if you want to see all of a posting of all of ADB's vacancies, just click on View All Vacancies, okay? And then say, sir, if we could please click on Senior Energy Specialist Climate Change. Okay. So as you see, it will bring you to the job description of the position. And then on the upper right, it says apply for this vacancy. Sir, could you please click on that? No. So click again, Senior Energy Specialist, or any of those, okay? And then apply for this vacancy. The blue, on top, the block there. Apply for this vacancy. And then it will take you to the ADB Career and Employment System. So here you create your profile, and then you submit your application to the position. So that's how to submit an application and view ADB's vacancies. Sir, if we can go back to the presentation. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are the information that you should watch out for when you, so you go inside ADB's career site and then you click on view all vacancies. You will notice that our vacancies are grouped together by staff category. In ADB, we have 3 levels of staff categories. Okay, the national staff and the administrative staff, they are nationals of the duty station countries. So, in our headquarters in Manila, our national and administrative staff are Filipino nationals. In a resident mission here in Indonesia, our national and administrative staff are Indonesian nationals, and so on with our other 26 resident mission offices. So that's how it goes. Now, the admin staff are those who perform general services or administrative tasks. Now, the the national staff now, they perform more technical functions, but they're locally recruited because their technical knowledge is more on the local market, the country where they are. Okay. And that now spells difference between a national staff and an international staff. Because the international staff, so the national staff, they have technical knowledge on a local scale, whereas the international staff, they have international knowledge on an international scale. And the international staff can be nationals of any of ADB's 68 members. They can be assigned to the headquarters in Manila, or they can also be outposted to ADB's resident mission offices. Or Pak Said also earlier mentioned that we have representative offices, say, in Tokyo, in Frankfurt, and in Washington, D.C., or probably in the ADB's regional hub, PSOD regional hub in Singapore, or possibly in our Pacific country offices. So when we say international experience, then how do we define international experience? So one is that you should possess international professional certificates or national professional certificates from different countries. So that's one. 2 is in-depth knowledge of different countries based on research papers, publications, and other documents. That's 2. 3 is if somebody had already worked on in different countries for a relevant period of time, and the 4th is if a person has worked on transactions international in nature other than their country of nationality. So those are the things that will define international experience for those who would like to pursue an international staff career in ADB. Now, aside from the level of, the kind of staff category that you would like to consider in your career, you should also watch out for the type of appointment that is being offered for that position. So the first one is a standard fixed term. It's a full-time appointment for an initial period of 3 years. It may be extended. It may not be renewed, but it can also be converted to a regular staff position. So that's a standard fixed term. Most of our vacancies, if you go to the ADB career site, most of those are standard fixed term positions. And then we have senior staff fixed term positions for IS7 to IS10 level positions. So these are for director to head of department vacancies. So these are for a full term of full-time fixed term of 3 years. They can be renewed, or they can be extended, or they can or not renewed. And then we have the special fixed term appointments, which are typically for 2 years or 3 years, and these positions are created to fulfill business needs of the bank. Okay. So next slide, please. So earlier, the first slide, remember, I showed you what the steps are in the recruitment process. So I said earlier, typically posting is for 2 weeks. Now between posting and screening, okay, that will take around 1 to 3 weeks. And then shortlisting to interviews another 2 to 3 weeks. And so as you see, no, from the initial application list of 50 to 150, by the time we reach the interviews, we will have probably 1 to 3, but there are times when, you know, this goes all the way up to 5. 5 who go through panel interviews. Next slide, please. Okay. So you also saw this slide earlier with Pierre. But here, what I want to talk about more is the core competencies. So in the job description, you will see that each job description will have a link to the core competencies for the position level of that vacancy. So how do you prepare for your interview? Because aside from your questions on your technical and your knowledge and skills, you will be asked questions on these core competencies, as Pierre mentioned earlier, your soft skills. So during the interview, you will likely be asked questions on, tell me about a time when, okay? Now, these will fall under your core competencies. And these questions are asked during the interview because your resume already tells us what you did, right? But through these questions, we will learn more about you. It will tell us how you did it. And the thinking, the idea is that, you know, the way that you would respond to these questions, your actions in the past will now predict, you know, your future success. That's why these core competencies are asked during interviews. Now, as for potential, these are the 5 competencies that are looked into by you know, by the panel during an interview. So they look at the specialization. Okay, they want to see your level of expertise. How deep is your level of expertise? Your knowledge, your practical knowledge that you can apply to ADB's context. Flexibility, your tolerance to diversity. How flexible are you? Not just in terms of the way that you work, but also in the way that you relate with other people. Because in ADB, you know, we have colleagues from 60 other nationalities. So you can imagine the diversity in culture and in background of the staff. We're having audio. Hello, hello.
Check.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry, sir, can we go back one slide? Okay. Okay, so, yeah. Those are problem-solving ability, so your ability to come up with solutions through discussion and collaboration with your colleagues. Communication is not just about language skill, but it's also about being able to communicate logically and convincingly. And then, of course, learning agility. You have to be able to learn and grow beyond your area or sector of expertise. Next slide, please. So now, you've already read the job description, not just read, but read and understand. Aside from that, what else should you do to prepare for your interview? You should also read up on the organization's goals and values, okay? And then, of course, you're well aware of your experience, your skills, your knowledge. Now, if you put them together, bring them closer together, then somehow you will draw up, an intersection between what the organization's needs are and what is being called for, what are the needs of that position. Then that's where you add value, right? where that intersection is, what their needs are, and what you can offer. And that's something that you should highlight during your interview. So how to prepare for that interview? Read and understand the job description, okay? When you click on that link to the core competencies, start thinking of situations where you think you will be able to demonstrate those core competencies, okay? Like innovation, working together, client centricity. So you think of situations wherein you think that you demonstrate those core competencies and then practice. So earlier said, Pierre mentioned that during our interviews include a 10-minute presentation. So practice for that presentation. Time yourself. Because there are times, right, when the candidates are asked to stop at the 10-minute and they're not actually done with their presentation. So practice, time yourself so that you can finish that entire thing in 10 minutes. Come up with mock questions, no, on the core competencies and practice answering. Now, when you practice answering, use the STAR method. Are you familiar with the STAR method? Okay. The STAR method is that you structure your response in 4 parts. First is S, stands for situation. Okay. Think of a situation you were in that demonstrates that core competency. So you use this for when you are asked situational questions. So think of a situation you were in that core competency. Now, task is what is the action that you needed, that was needed from you. So that's the action. Task. That's a task, okay? What was needed from you. A stands for action. So what did you do, okay, to address that action, okay? Are there alternatives that you considered that you rejected and why? So it would be good merely not to talk about what action, but are there alternatives that you considered, because then that will give the interviewers an insight now into your thinking process, no? And then after that, the results. So what were the results of your action? The results may not always be good, but at least you also talk about your learning experience, no? So and you also talk about, if you were faced again with that situation in the future, will you do it differently? Okay, so just giving an advice. Okay, so use the STAR method. You can Google it, so that then you just a tip on how to respond to situational questions. Next slide, please. So lastly, okay, we will go to your LinkedIn profile. So how many of you here are already on LinkedIn? Oh, almost every. Whoa, very good, okay. So why is LinkedIn important? Okay. So earlier, if you might have caught it, I said that we also do proactive sourcing of candidates on LinkedIn. It's important to always be present and for your profiles to be updated, because you'll never know when a position will be required by ADB, and we will do that search. That can be today, tomorrow, and if you're not there, then and not just ADB, for any organization, because we all know that LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network. They have 900, as of end August, they have 930 million members, 60+ million organizations in the platform, and then 61 million passive job seekers. So you can imagine, for organizations like us, it's really a treasure, to find somebody on LinkedIn. So posting vacancies is a passive way for us, to find candidates for our positions, but we also have an active approach to doing that by searching profiles on LinkedIn. So make sure that your LinkedIn profiles are updated and that you are searchable. So you use, keywords on your LinkedIn profile. So, say if you're a data person, I don't know, maybe Excel is not too much now, right? But, say things like Python, RStudio, anything, because these are words, anything that is relevant to your sector, relevant to your field. Make sure that they are on that LinkedIn profile so that you can easily be searched. And because LinkedIn is a professional platform, the way that you present yourself should also be professional. Your profile picture should be how you would present yourself if you were to attend an interview. And the way that you should engage on LinkedIn should also be professional, right? So when you share content or when you comment, this should always be professional because your hiring manager, the line manager, or the HR who is reviewing your profile will be looking you up and will be checking all these, okay? So that's it. For my part of the presentation, I hope that you all picked up something. So, but before we go to the Q&A, I would just like to say that I saw somebody holding the USB. Oh, there, okay. So we have them outside. Aside from that, we also have sticky notes. Please take one. The information that we have on the USB and on those sticky notes, those are, it has our ADB, LinkedIn shortcut, the page. And then it also has email address where you can reach the business partners of ADB. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Said, Pak Pierre, and Ibu Geraldine. So now Q&A. We open for discussion for the audience here, also for our audience watching us from YouTube, right? Right now, I already have one question from YouTube. So opening another two questions from you guys. Please inform us your name and background. Please. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you as well for the very insightful discussion. My name is Arundhati Warastika. I'm currently coming into my final year as an undergraduate management student at Universitas Gadjah Mada. First of Arundhati Warastika. Arundhati. Yes. Okay. So I've actually, as I'm reaching my final year, I've been very interested in national development in Indonesia. And I've read a lot of the works from ADB, and I have a lot of respect for the organization as well as its contribution towards our national development. And I'm actually directing this question to all the panelists, but specifically Pak Said. I would like to ask about how ADB plans to integrate the innovative finance facility for climate in Asia and the Pacific, the IF CAP, because I noticed like it was just developed on May 2nd, like a few weeks ago, and to support the upcoming presidency, as well as the Indonesia's plan to move the capital city to Kalimantan, sir. Okay, is my question clear, sir? Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you to all the panelists, sirs and ma'ams. It was a very, very interesting presentation. So my name is Shali. I'm currently majoring in economics. And as an economic major, I'm obviously very thrilled and excited to be hearing ADB, because who doesn't want to work at ADB? So my question is actually more towards the career side. So I would direct it to Ms. Geraldine, but if any other panelists would like to add, feel free to do so. So my question is it possible for undergraduate students to intern? And if so, are there any remote or hybrid positions, considering that most of us are here in UGM and have classes in Jogja? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you, Shelly. So we have one more question from YouTube, which is from Adek Nasim Agung. Yeah, this question is about ADB is financial company. Is there any chance that the company needs engineer? In example, for my study is in civil engineering. Is there any specialization or skills that I need to develop to join? Thank you. So this is probably for Pierre or Geraldine. So perhaps please Pak Said to answer question on the climate finance from Anundita ya. Alta.
Okay, no, thank you so much, yeah, Arundita. So basically, this is a new facility, yeah, the IFCAP facility, which is the Innovative Finance Facility for Climate in Asia and the Pacific. But this facility is part of ADB's wider effort to become a climate bank in Asia and the Pacific. So our target is to be able to provide $100 billion of financing in climate in the Asia and the Pacific between 2019 2030. And the idea here is that through IFCAP, we want to be able to mobilize funding. Every dollar that we finance, we can catalyze at least another dollar, if not more. The idea is to be able to catalyze $5. Now, this is a new facility, so we'll see how this will evolve and support ADB's ambition to become a climate bank to provide $100 billion financing. What we have done in Indonesia is, in terms of climate, right? We have worked with PTSMI. PTSMI is Sarana Multi Infrastructure Indonesia. It's an SMV, Special Mission Vehicle, under the Ministry of Finance. So if you know, we have many SOEs in Indonesia. Most of those SOEs are under the Ministry of SOE. But there are 5 SOEs in Indonesia that are under the Ministry of Finance. One of them is PTSMI. And we are working with them to facilitate green infrastructure financing, right? So we put in $150 million that can then be used by PTSMI through a facility, through a platform, SDG Green Indonesia Financing Facility. And that platform, which we work with PTSMI, can then also be mobilized to seek funding from other development partners, from other partners, banks and development partners, that can then be used to finance green infrastructure. ADB is also supporting the taxonomy of green infrastructure. What is green infrastructure, for example, right? So that is one of the ways that we are supporting climate in Indonesia. Another way is obviously through energy transition mechanism, through Just Energy Transition, JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership. We are now providing funding to one of an IPPs in Cirebon to also retire earlier the coal-fired power plant. So there is a live transaction today as we speak of a coal-fired power plant that is being retired earlier, and this is by IPP, not by PLN, right? That can then be a model to help facilitate more earlier retirement of coal-fired power plant. Now, we're also looking at ways to be able to fund more or finance more renewable energy in the country, particularly particularly outside of Java, right? Java, Bali. These are some of the, so IFCAP is one of the funding mechanism that we are trying to sort of create in order to facilitate that. Now, you mentioned about Nusantara. Nusantara is also another, ADB is also very much involved in Nusantara. We're helping them on master planning. We're helping them on create an environmental assessment framework so that projects that are being constructed there will be able to help the government achieve their net zero emission target. Now, in the country, under COP26, the government has made a commitment to achieve net zero emission target by, anybody knows? 2060. So by 2060. In Nusantara is by 2045. So 2045 in Nusantara, and the Nusantara, that commitment was made in COP27. Net zero emission target for the country was made in the COP26 in Glasgow. So ADB is supporting the government and supporting Nusantara, including to make sure that they can achieve that. Because Nusantara wants to become a model city, right? Wants to become a city that is sustainable, green for a city. So we're helping them on that. We're also helping on mobilizing financing, right? Mobilizing financing including from the private sector, including through PPP mechanism. We have not provided any funding yet for projects, but we are providing funding for technical assistance and studies and so forth in Nusantara. So we are very much involved in Nusantara. Have I addressed your question? Okay, maybe when we do the networking, we can have more discussions. Yeah. All right. I'll hand it over.
So I'll take on Shelly's question. Okay, so you're now still in your undergraduate studies, okay? And one of the reasons why we conduct these career presentations in universities, although we realize that it's still very early in your career, if you will remember one of the slides that Pierre covered, talked about as one of our requirements, that core competency. And so the reason why we're here is that, so that we can give that advice, to students, university students, bachelors or masters, or in their masters. In the career events that we hold, there are some wherein we invite staff to talk about their career journey prior to joining ADB. And what is resounding in those talks is that they say that you pick a field, you pick a sector, and then build your skills on it, build your experience on it. So earlier, that slide mentioned that the minimum years of experience required by ADB is 6. And so at this point, it might still be too early. But please do, just pick that career path that you want to take, and then over the years, build your experience on it, and then hopefully, you will find that right vacancy for you 6 or 7 years or 5 years down the road.
Okay, thank you. So I'm trying to answer the question from Nasim Anggung about engineering. So our main sectors in civil engineering are basically energy, transport, urban, water. Those are the main sectors that, the main projects where ADB is involved in, right? So we do have a wide range of expertise. So because in ADB we are not the ones who are going to build the road or the bridge or the power plant. We are going to be working with vendors, right? With companies. We will be the ones who will be managing the resources, managing the process, the relationship with the government, basically managing the problems, right? But the technical work will be done by an external company. But yeah, usually, of course, renewable energy is a crucial sector in climate change, right? Electrical engineers, when we build smart cities, so knowing how smart grids work, that's also a very important sector. So just to give you some examples. So I hope I answered to your question. You want to add something, Said, or that's okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think in general, yeah. While ADB would like to have people with strong technical expertise, there are also, pathways for you to join ADB, like SYP, Young Professional Program, right? This is, so it does require you to have certain technical expertise, certain educational background, but that is a path that basically groom you to a more of a generalist type. So I can tell you that I joined ADB as a young professional. I had a law degree. I did my master's eventually in international banking and finance law, joined Office of the General Counsel. But since I joined through YP, I went through a bit of more of a generalist path, if you like, right? Eventually, initially more as a lawyer, but then eventually now I'm a bit more of a generalist as a deputy country director in a resident mission. this is, being a YP is something that I would really encourage most of you to aim for. You're still relatively young, I can see, at least from what I can see. Most of you here are probably still less than 32, less than 33, obviously, but less than 32. And prepare yourself, groom yourself to be able to meet the requirements. Now, young professional obviously is something that we have in ADB, but it's also a program that you will find in other international financial institutions. Now, just one thing to note, yeah. I was the last YP from Indonesia. This was 21 years ago. July 5th was when I joined ADB in 2002. Since then, there has not been any YP from Indonesia. So, I think if you have the right talent, if you have the right experience, ADB is an organization that wants to bring in people from various backgrounds. If this is something where Indonesia has not had a person coming in, I think, they will look into a highly qualified potential Indonesian applying for a YP, probably with a kinder outlook, right? So no guarantees, obviously, you have to meet the requirements, but there are so many applications for that, that if you are in Indonesia and you're very good, you will stand out because of that, right? So I do recommend all of you here to sort of look into not just the mid-career professional track, but also the young professional track, yeah. And then also, in order to sort of achieve the YP, look at the internship program as well, right? In anything you do, yeah, you're sort of creating a building block, right? There is no instant steps for anything. You've got to sort of be patient, be strategic, and build that block, right? That can then lead you to a path that you want eventually. Because whatever you do today will have an impact on what you do tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So be mindful of that as well. Yeah. So let me just stop there.
Thank you. So we now opening for the next batch of questions, please. Yeah.
Right, so thank you for the opportunity, and it was a pleasure meeting everyone in this occasion, especially for the panelists. So allow me to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Cristigo. You can call me by Elizabeth. I'm currently a management student at FEB UGM, particularly for the second year. So my question goes to Mr. Sahid, but of course other panelists could add up to this answering this question as well. So in the face of political and social unrest in certain member countries, how does the ADB maintain its commitment to impartiality and uphold its mission to promote inclusive and sustainable development? Thank you.
Next question.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Arif. I'm a student from ASEAN Master in Sustainability Management in Medicine Management. Just a quick question on the career part. So is it possible for example, I'm from Brunei. So if I'm applying to internship in Indonesia, for example, is it possible for other nationality to apply in different offices around the region? Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Arif. One more question? One, two, three. Okay. About impartiality during crisis, Pak Said, probably the one.
Yeah. Okay. No. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Very good question. Yeah. I mean, we do find that in some of our member countries, right, they go through upheavals, right. I mean, the most well-known would be Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, had a long-standing conflict between the LTE Tamil with the Sinhalese government, right? So how do we manage? How do we handle that? So we work with the government of the day, right? We don't work with a particular person, but we work with the government of the day. But we are free to engage with all the relevant stakeholders in order to ensure that whatever we provide, the support that we provide, they are fit for purpose. Okay. Now, there are some limitations. Obviously, when we provide loan, for example, or finance, we provide that to the government. The government has to provide concurrence. But our engagement can be with anyone, right? So and we then try to sort of convince the government, this is still part of your territory, and if you want, development to basically spread through the country, then you cannot ignore a certain part of the territory and so on and so forth. So, ADB has in the past, for example, engaged also with parts of the government, part of with stakeholders who are not necessarily part of the government, who may be hostile to the government, but we do it in a way that that is open and transparent. So we would meet, and then we would then convey what we find to the government and so on and so forth, right? But there is no hesitation for us, and there's no limitation. But we do operate on the basis that ADB is a non-political entity, and therefore we do not engage in political. We do not make our decisions based on political considerations. We do not interact in political, political activities, right? Or anything that can be perceived as political, as being politically sensitive. But we are able to engage with different stakeholders, and it is important for us to be able to engage even with parties that may not be amenable, let's say, to the government of the day. Now, this is in a much different context, right? But we do engage. We don't just ADB, for example, does not just engage with the government. We have a very strong engagement with our CSO, the civil society organizations. ADB in Indonesia, we have a civil society advisory group. We'll bring in the leading CSO activists, and we have a very frank, periodic conversations with them, sort of understand the issues and their perspective that may not be something which we would get in our interactions with the government, right? Because they come in with a different angle. So, to answer your question, we do, when there's conflict, when there's upheaval, we do monitor the situations. We do not partake in actions that may be perceived as being political. But we are able, and we do at times engage with let's say, opposing parties and so forth. But in order to be effective, we do need to make sure that those interactions that we do are done in a way that is transparent and contribute to our conversations and our discussions with the government, right? So I hope I've answered your question. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Arif. Did I get your name correctly? Okay, for that question. So, Pierre earlier mentioned that there are two batches of intake. Just to give a brief background on the more information on the internship program. So there are two batches. The first batch we advertised around July, and then the interns come on board in January. And then the second batch is advertised around December until about January the next year. And then the interns come on board in June. Okay. So Pierre earlier mentioned that the internship opportunities are project specific. So there are specific projects that these interns will need to work on. Some of those, most of the time, so when we advertise around, say, 15, 16 per batch, most of those will be in headquarters. Okay. But there are times when, because internship opportunities are demand-driven, so meaning that before we post, these internship opportunities, the departments will come to HR and say that, we have this research project that we want an intern to work with us on this. And then so that's what drives the nature of research that is being undertaken during an internship. Some of those, so in other words, the reason why I'm saying that is that most of those are in HQ, but there are times when some of those researches would be for specific resident missions. So, so you said that you are a national of Brunei, right? Brunei is an ADB member. And so, whether it be for staff positions or for internship opportunities, all nationals of ADB's members are welcome to apply. Okay, and yeah, so the answer is yes, but whether you can apply for internship in Indonesia resident mission, we do not know yet, because it will depend if there is an internship in the Indonesia resident mission office.
You want to mention about the remuneration for interns? Because, okay. So, but just, we have financial support for interns, right? Should you join the HQ in Manila, there will be support for your plane tickets, there will be a stipend. I'm not sure about the details of the stipend, but it's basically, sufficient resources for you to survive during 2 to 3 months.
So thank you. Maybe one final question is okay. One final question. After this, we're going to have a group photo, and then we have some networking session. Please, siapa, Pak?
Thank you for the opportunities. Please introduce. My name is Budi. I'm from management program here. I would like to ask, how does COVID-19 affect your business? I mean, like, in terms of how the employment process and the employment condition, do you have laid-offs during this pandemic terms? Because we just hear a lot of startups having cut off a lot of people. And how do you adapt that new condition to your business process as well? Because now we already announced that, it's becoming endemic. Now people coming to the office more often, but we already have this kind of setup. Thank you.
Question on whether the impact of COVID on ADB operation.
So, I think your question is twofold. Yeah, the impact of COVID to ADB operations, impact of COVID to ADB employment. On the ADB employment, I will let my colleagues to deliberate further on that. On the first item, I can tell you that ADB is a development partner, right, of the government, and we provide in our arsenal funding, knowledge, and partnership. Obviously, when you have COVID-19, right, or you have shocks such as that, there's an economic downturn. There is greater reliance on engagement with development partners. What does that mean? We've never been busier. So, we're very, very busy, but in 2020, it was actually the busiest year for ADB, right, to date at that time. Now we're very busy because we're working on ETM, JETP, we have a lot of things going on. But in order for us to be responsive, we wanted to make sure that we're able to provide government with funding that they need, right? So that's why in 2020, ADB was the largest provider of development finance, bar none, right? We tried to support the government in addressing the challenges of people being laid off, and therefore, there was a need for social protection program. Vaccine was also an issue. We tried to provide funding for vaccine to the government through biopharma, and there were other other issues that we've policy dialogue that we've had, policy dialogue that we facilitated between senior policymakers in the region, because nobody has ever seen an impact a pandemic such as this in their lifetime, and the impact that they bring, right, at a global scale. So people wanted to learn from each other. We facilitated that learning. Right? We bring in international experts and so on and so forth. So we were never, we've never been busier in 2020 than as compared to previous years. And actually since that time, I think we've only been busier since then. But that was the impact of COVID-19. At least from IRM perspective, we certainly did not lay off anybody. In fact, we had to hire more people during COVID.
Okay. Yeah, let me just respond to the COVID, because yeah, it's very interesting from a business management perspective, right? Because from one day to another, we were a heavily paper-based organization. You know, we had, luckily, the manpower in the Philippines is not too expensive. So we were able to afford, for example, a secretary who was bringing documents, for signatures in 5, 6 different offices. Documents, it needs 5 signatures, so I need to go to the office of such and such to get the signature. Just to give you an idea. And from one day to another, should we had the plan to move to digital, it would have taken us 1, 2, or 3 years to go through this project. But from one day to another, COVID kicked in, and we had to work from home from one day to another. So we had no choice but to make it happen, electronically. So we became much more digital. We use standard document workflow, DocuSign, all those kind of tools. Our IT colleagues, I can tell you, they were also super busy, because they have to face all those issues, right? And we're still dealing with old legacy systems that we need to phase out. And at the same time, now you have AI technologies, coming in. It's a revolution, right, for everybody. So I think today, one advice, if you have one day you run a business, make sure that you never under-invest in your IT system, right? And make sure that you make the right choices, because it's very hard to switch, from one system to another. And never be too dependent on one vendor, if possible. So, and then we spoke earlier about the work from home, right? Arrangement, keeping some flexibility, being agile. I think one main lessons learned is that you need to be able to adapt. And maybe COVID is just the beginning, just only one element among others, right? There's so many challenges. So you need, as a business, you need to remain as agile as possible and focus on your talents. Basically, our people are our main assets. Right. So in some companies, some organizations, they pull in together HR and IT, and they create one department. They call them from different names, because systems and people go together. The problem sometimes that we have is that we don't understand the jargon of IT people, and IT people do not understand the jargon of business. So yeah, just to give you some examples.
Okay, so also in addition to that, Moody, so nobody knew, right? So today we were in the office, and tomorrow it was lockdown. So we were all told to stay home. And ADB was very quick in adjusting to that. So thankfully, the staff were already using laptops. And, staff were given support. Staff were issued pocket Wi-Fi. So a week or so later, we were asked to come to the office to collect our personal belongings, because nobody knew how long the lockdown was going to take, right? So we were issued personal pocket Wi-Fis to support us in our work. And during that time, believe it or not, recruitment did not stop. Recruitment, yeah. So we continued to recruit during the pandemic, because of course, we had needs that we need, positions that we needed to fill, and so people were onboarding virtually. They were being onboarded virtually into their teams. And only when we reached stage 4 in September of last year, did the new staff that we had recruited from March 2020, up to that time, started to report to headquarters in Manila or their duty station country, wherever that is amongst ADB's resident mission offices.
What? Okay, so another question about no, 3 years. No, 3 years. Okay, I think the only opportunity will be if ever our budget or accounting department opens a position for young professionals, which is quite unlikely, to be honest. Because usually young professionals, they work in operations. OGC, the General Counsel Office, was maybe an exception, right? But 3 years in accounting, I would say it's will be a little bit difficult. Internships, if there is a specific internships which relates to accounting and budget, that's a possibility. Yeah.
I saw a question here. What are the factors contributing to global success for international business? I'm not very clear on that. But what I can tell you is this, right? For Indonesians to be able to be successful at an international arena, I think there is a need. I'm just sort of reflecting on myself. As it happens, my family are all, my siblings are all also pursuing international careers. We're all local graduates. We all graduated from UI, as it happens. But we all have international careers. I'm with ADB, 21 years, 17 years in Manila. We got a brother in OPEC Fund in Vienna, who's a director there. We have another brother in Ericsson, Stockholm. He's below one level below C. He's head of business development and strategy for Ericsson Global. I've got a sister who was formerly a professor with ANU in Canberra, but was just been brought back by the Minister of Health, and is now supporting him in the Ministry of Health. But one thing that I can tell you is this, right? Hard skills, I think, Indonesians, we have no problem. But it's the soft skills that can probably become, that has sort of become a bit of a barrier for Indonesians. And I think if we manage that, we can do very well, right? And the soft skills is communication, right? The ability to communicate clearly, the ability to communicate confidently, right? And communicate clearly also requires you to speak to the point. Brevity is virtue. Often for Indonesians, we speak at length that often people are not able to understand what is the main point. I don't see that so much in the younger generation, but certainly in my generation. English has also become, I think it's becoming less and less of a problem for this generation as compared to my generation, right? So I'm very hopeful that going forward, younger Indonesians will be able to have greater presence at an international scene, at a global scene, the way that we were not able to at my generation. And this is one of the reasons why we're having such a program, Outreach in Indonesia, is because very few Indonesians are in international organizations, including ADB. Should point out that today there are only 23 international staff from Indonesia in ADB, when there is 1,350 international staff. When I joined in 2002, there was 32 Indonesians, and we only had less than 800 international staff. So there is a need for more Indonesians in international fora. This issue is also the same, with Asia infrastructure, in World Bank, IMF, in Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, in OPEC Fund, as well as in Islamic Development Bank. So I do hope that the session we have today has been useful, for you to hopefully generate interest in understanding more about ADB and the work of international financial institutions such as ADB, and more importantly, hopefully it'll sort of plant a seed for you to think about a career in ADB, whether that's in our Jakarta office, which is also a very exciting, very exciting work, and we do a lot of things in IRM, in Indonesia Resident Mission, but also perhaps looking into potential career with ADB in our headquarters. and perhaps even be the next Indonesian to join the young professional program, right, after 21 years. All right, so maybe with that, yeah, we can conclude the session today. Maybe have a little bit of networking, yeah. Let me stop there.
So thank you all for participating. I see that nobody is leaving since it started. So let's now have a group photo and then have a chit chat for a while. We need to go to meet Ibu Rector at 4. So 4. Yeah. So thank you so much. Oh yeah. This is ADB social media. You could follow us here for info. Yeah, okay. Thank you to Ibu Dian and all ADB, all UGM team who support us for this session. Thank you, Ibu. Thank you for the team. Okay.
Let's have a group picture.